This is the Dark Matters podcast. This is Genghis Khan. Previously, on episode 1, we followed Temujin's rise through the steppes from an exiled orphan to killing his own brother and becoming a prisoner of the Taichuids. We see him escape and align with the powerful Ong Khan, the leader of the Karaid tribe. But peace on the steppes is rare and often short-lived. On a warm summer's night at the base of the Kentai Mountains, Temujin awakens from a strange dream. He sits up inside his family's yurt. He is still groggy from sleep, and then he hears them. The thunderclap of horse hooves echo across the steppes, and Temujin has goosebumps. 300 rival Merkid warriors approach his camp from the west. These men have arrived seeking retribution for crimes committed by Usagi. Temujin races outside his family's yurt and wakes his men up. He doesn't know who is approaching or why they are here. What he does know is that he is outnumbered and caught off guard. And with only minutes to spare until the Merkids reach his camp, he is faced with a life or death decision. He hides Holan underneath a pile of wool inside an ox cart, leaving her and the other woman at his camp. He then gathers his men, and in a haste, they gallop across the steppes and follow deep into the forest. This was tactical. By leaving the women behind, he knew that they would be spared. The Merkid's army arrives at the remnants of Temujin's abandoned camp, and they notice that it has been deserted. They change course, and Merkid trackers follow the trail of Temujin's horses into the forest. But the master of the mountains has vanished. His rivals circle back and turn their attention to the abandoned camp. Here they find an old lady alongside an ox cart. "Where is your chief?" they ask her. "Not here," the lady replies. The commander of the Merkid army dismounts his horse before inspecting the ox cart. He begins to pull out the wool, and underneath he discovers Borte hiding. The Merkid men grab her and they ride off across the steppes. This attack was in response to Temujin's father Usagi kidnapping Holan from a Merkid warrior. Temujin stays hidden in the forest, and he watches the men ride off with Borte. He is outnumbered and powerless to help. To intervene would mean certain death. This harsh lesson of steppe life had taught him that without power and status, you will become a victim. Determined to strike back, Temujin gathers his men and they ride out seeking the wisdom of the powerful Ong Khan. Ong is livid when he hears of the Merkid's attack on his young protege. He calls the attack on Temujin and the kidnapping of Borte an act of war. Ong enlists an army of elite Karaid soldiers to accompany Temujin and attack the Merkids. This presents a perfect opportunity for Ong to plunder them and enjoy the financial gain of war. Temujin is instructed to seek the help of another ally. The man's name is Jamuka, and he hails from the powerful Jadarin clan. Temujin rides on horseback to Bodokan Borji and meets with the Jadarins. Here he is finally reunited with his childhood best friend, the same man that he swore an oath with as a child along the banks of the Onon River. Temujin and Jamuka are now fully grown up, and the two wolves are ready to hunt. The skill and efficiency of Mongol warriors is what sets them apart and makes them a dangerous adversary. Rather than travelling with heavy equipment and supplies, these warriors pack light and use blistering speed to surprise the enemy. A distance that would take a normal army weeks to cover could be traversed by the faster Mongols within days. Jamukha and Temujin, along with Ong Khan's carried army, ride from Burkan Khaldun to Bodakan Borji. They stop at the banks of a large river and are unable to cross the fast-flowing water on horseback. Instead, they cut down trees and lash together wood and make rafts, and in the dead of the night they arrive into Merkid territory. They approach their rivals silently and traverse the steppes, forming a pincer attack. Within minutes, these elite forces have surrounded their rivals' camp. Some Merkid men stay, others surrender, and they are slaughtered. Temujin is reunited with Borte, and he holds his wife tight. This is the woman who'd stayed with him through everything, through all his trials and tribulation, and for the first time in his life, he indulges in the spoils of war. Once a poor orphan boy, he is shocked at the fortunes he now has from plundering the Merkids. Food, women, servants. He could get used to this. Ong Khan takes his cut and withdraws his carried army to Burkan Khaldun, leaving Temujin and Jamukha together. The two wolves would celebrate victory with a party and a feast fit for kings. In front of their soldiers, they renew their childhood blood oath, and together they form a new alliance. And under the stars that night, the two men would sleep outside together and share a blanket. This was symbolic in Mongolian culture, and it was a strong showing of unity. And over the next year and a half, these two wolves would terrorize the steppes, looting and slaughtering any rivals who stood in their way. Throughout their campaign of war, a strong difference in leadership and political views would begin to create a fractured relationship between the two wolves. Jamukha is aligned with the traditional aristocratic views of Mongolia, where military rank and prestige is based on your name and which family you are born into. Temujin believes that rank and power should be based on merit and your accomplishments on the battlefield. With the traditional system in place, Jamukha was classed as Whitebone and Temujin Blackbone. This meant that he would always outrank him based on his name and not his accomplishments in war. The tension between the two would reach boiling point when Jamukha used his Whitebone privilege to pull rank. One night, whilst riding ahead of their Mongol army, Jamukha orders Temujin to fall back and prepare the food and shelter for the night whilst he leads. Temujin was disgusted by the insult. How could a sworn brother talk down to him like that? He tells Borte of the disrespect, and she advises him to leave Jamukha and become his own man. Tired of the Whitebone privilege and traditional views of Mongolia, Temujin summons a band of his most loyal followers, and they abandon Jamukha in the middle of the night and travel to Dalan Balzut. This is huge. It shows Temujin's disregard for politics and Mongolian hierarchy. The Blackbone commoner has abandoned tradition and started his own Mongol army of misfits. And it wasn't only Temujin that felt this way. He is joined by thousands of soldiers who favour his leadership and warfighting ability. Master Ong Khan happily watches this rivalry develop from the sidelines, playing them both like a fiddle. He stays neutral in the war, and as long as the two wolves clash with each other, they will never challenge his carried army. Jamukha takes this separation as a direct betrayal. He warns his soldiers about the dangers should Temujin's horde of Mongols become too powerful. And on the windswept plains of the steppes, Jamukha would strike first in the Battle of Dalan Balzut. The two wolves fight at a blistering pace for 3 days, and many lives are lost. Jamukha overpowers his rival, forcing him to retreat and lose many casualties in the battle. By now, the rivalry has consumed him. In a sign of sheer madness, he orders Temujin's captured soldiers to be boiled alive. By boiling the men, it was believed it would destroy their soul. This sends a ruthless message to his followers about the dangers of betrayal. Following Jamuka's victory, a Kuratali or tribal meeting is called, and he is declared the Khan of his large army. Temujin stumbles across the steppes. His heart is heavy with the loss, and the betrayal of a sworn brother cuts deep. But with every scar, he grows stronger, attracting only the most loyal followers. Jamuka's boiling of the captured soldiers had the opposite effect that he intended. Many of his own men flee in fear and join Temujin, strengthening his horde of Mongol warriors. This uplifts his spirits, and Temujin begins to see in real time that his new ways of thinking and leadership are finally being accepted by the masses. The rivalry between the two wolves would continue for years, with tit-for-tat battles and skirmishes exchanged between the two armies. On one occasion, a group of warriors would abandon Jamuka and warn Temujin of an impending attack. His rival has come to finish him once and for all. Heeding the warning, the Master of the Mountains moves his army to the high ground, and he lies in wait, preparing a trap. Temujin's scouts spot Jamuka approaching from the south. They also notice he is joined by the Taichuids and the powerful Naimans. With the backup from these large tribes supporting Jamuka, it was clear that he'd come to finish his rival once and for all. But fate would have other plans. On the eve of battle, an immense storm would appear on the horizon and lash the steppes with torrential rain and thunder. This made the journey on horseback treacherous. Although the Naimans and Taichuids have aligned to help Jamuka conquer Temujin, they view this storm as a bad omen. They both abandon him and flee in different directions. The Master of the Mountains sees them retreat, and he charges towards Jamuka, forcing him to flee. He then changes course and pursues the fleeing Taichuids. Temujin's army is ferocious, and within hours he has surrounded the Taichuids. The men who beat him as a youth are brutally slaughtered, and in a surprising act of grace, Temujin offers the other warriors clemency, and they join his horde of Mongols. This was another tactic that made Temujin an elite warfighter. By granting captured rivals freedom and allowing them to join his horde of Mongols, he was able to grow his army much faster than any of his rivals. Following his victory over Jamuka, Temujin travels once again to seek the wisdom of Ong Khan, and together they decide it's time to attack the Tartars and gain control over the eastern steppes. The carried army accompany Temujin's horde, and they ride across the plains into Tartar territory. Tartar scouts spot Temujin and the Karyids approaching from miles away. They warn senior leadership about their arrival. Some men flee, others stay, and the Tartars fortify their position inside a large barricade. Temujin approaches the men and asks them to surrender at the barricade. If they do, he will spare their lives. Pridefully, the men decline, and Temujin gives his troops a simple direction. Any Tartar male taller than the axle of his ox cart is to be slaughtered. This would in essence erase their whole bloodline, and one by one they captured their rivals and measured them against the axle. The women were taken as concubines, and the remaining members of the tribe joined Temujin's horde. This was a gigantic moment in Temujin's war campaign. Once an orphan boy and abandoned by members of his tribe, he managed to start his own army of misfit Mongols and defeat one of the big three super tribes. Ong Khan is mesmerized by his young protege's tactical brilliance and warfighting ability. Although proud, he watches Temujin closely. The orphan of the steppes has now become powerful, a little too powerful. Dark Matters out.